We just stepped on their face with a hobnail boot and broke their nose. We just crushed their face.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Glory UGA podcast, brought to you by our good friends at MyBookie. And if you are of the betting persuasion, even slightly, do yourself a solid. Go to mybookie.ag right now. Sign up for a new account. Use our code UGA. Your first bet, guys, going to be fully covered, all the way up to $500. So jump on that deal while it lasts. But while the Auburn win was great, and I know we're all still basking in the glow of our 9th consecutive win over the Tigers, it's now time to officially turn our attention towards Ole Miss with a deep dive preview of Saturday's top 10 matchup between the Dogs and the Rebs. And guys, these deep dive previews that I do each and every week are truly designed for you diehard Georgia fans, like everything else here on this channel is. So if that is who you are, if you're a diehard Georgia fan, go ahead, subscribe to the channel right now. Everything we do is designed for you. You don't want to miss any of it. Subscribe. Turn those notifications on, like, comment. What is your take on this matchup between Georgia and Ole Miss? Do you feel good about it? You're a little nervous? Where is your head right now? I'd love to hear from you guys. But all right, yet another big game for Georgia in a season that looks like it's going to be full of big games. Maybe not every week, right? We had Tennessee, we had Alabama, Auburn on the road. I know they're not a great team, but going on the road at night, Deep South's oldest rivalry, always a big game there. We've got this game, we got Texas down the road. Georgia Tech might be undefeated when we play them, guys. Who knows? Maybe they'll lose to Duke this week, but they're going to be sitting pretty when we play them late in the season. So we got a lot of big games on our schedule this year, but this is certainly one of them. In fact, it is the first top 10 matchup of the season for Georgia as Lane Kiffin and the Ole Miss Rebels come to Athens. And guys, as I do every week, have a deep dive preview of this game for you guys. My goal is to always make this the most in-depth preview that any Georgia fan is going to find for these games. It's up to you to decide if I hit that mark, but that is what I'm shooting for, guys. And as we have been doing for a couple of weeks now, I'm going to use my countdown format. What does that mean? If you're new to the show, I'm going to give you 5 players to know from the Ole Miss roster, get you acquainted with this Ole Miss team if you haven't watched them all that much this year. I'll give you 4 stats that matter, that kind of tell the story of this matchup. I'll give you 3 reasons for optimism from the perspective of a Georgia fan. So as a Georgia fan, 3 reasons why you should feel good about the Dogs' chances in this game. I'll give you 2 reasons for concern. We'll flip it over and we'll get, hey, like it's not all sunshine and rainbows. What could be a problem for Georgia in this matchup? We'll wrap things up with 1 player to watch from the Georgia roster, 1 player I think can have a big impact on this game for the Georgia Bulldogs. So with that, let's go ahead, guys. We've got a lot to break down today, so let's get into it. 5 players to know here off the top, as we do each and every week on these preview shows. We've got to start with the opposing quarterback. Why? Because it's the most important position on any football team. And Ole Miss is no different here, guys. Now, their quarterback situation is it's different. It's a little interesting this year. All offseason, we heard about Austin Simmons this, Austin Simmons that. This guy's going to be a shoo-in as one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. Maybe he'll even be in the Heisman Trophy conversation. Did you see what he did against Georgia in that one drive in Oxford last year? Yeah, it was a great drive, touchdown drive. But there was a lot of stock put into Austin Simmons based off that one drive. I guess there's also a lot of confidence and trust put in Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss Jr. and their ability to develop quarterbacks and produce quarterbacks that operate at a high level in that Ole Miss offense. So it was assumed that Austin Simmons was going to be the guy and just be awesome, plug and play for Ole Miss. And he was good-ish early in the year. I don't think he was great, as good as people expected him to be right out of the gate. Was throwing some picks, guys. Was making some tough decisions with the football the first couple games, but then got banged up against Kentucky. And it's transfer from Ferris State, Trinidad Chambliss, a guy. Give Lane Kiffin and company credit for going out and getting this guy from Ferris freaking State, bringing him in as a backup to Austin Simmons, hoping they wouldn't have to use him, but Austin Simmons goes down with injury. You plug in Trinidad Chambliss against LSU. All of a sudden, this guy's been a revelation for them, guys. To this point, as a starter, so I think he's got 4 games now as a starter for Ole Miss, dating back to that. I think it was actually the Arkansas game was his first start for Ole Miss. 65% completion percentage, 7 touchdowns, 1 pick, 306 yards passing per game. As a starter, was getting some spot duty at points earlier in the season, but wasn't a full-time guy, wasn't seeing a lot of duty. So as a starter, 306 yards per game, 7 touchdowns, 1 pick. In fact, guys, this is a crazy stat. He went 3 consecutive games of 300 yards passing and 50 plus yards rushing. So that was against Arkansas, LSU, and Tulane. Again, 3 consecutive games, 300 yards plus passing, 50 plus yards rushing. That was the first time in 30 years an SEC quarterback had put up those numbers in 3 consecutive games. So not only has he been good for Ole Miss for that 3 game stretch, he was doing literally historic things for the Rebels. He's 6'1", 200 pounds. When I look at him, guys, the way I would try to describe him to you if you haven't really watched him play, he's like a trimmer and faster Tua, like body shape. Like that's kind of what he reminds me of. But he's a really talented player. He obviously is a running threat. They'll use him in the design QB run game. They have no no hesitation to use him in that way. He's also a threat scrambling outside the pocket, creating things, just kind of out there in the pocket, outside the pocket, just kind of improvising out there. He does all of those things, guys, and he is a proficient passer from the pocket. There's still an RPO heavy offense, but he has, for the most part, been accurate in that offense. Now, he was, I thought, highly inaccurate in the most recent game. It was his worst performance as a starter against Washington State, which is the worst team they have played with him as a starter. So kind of weird, but he was missing throws all over the place, guys. Like open dudes down the field, short, intermediate, down the field, missing guys left and right. So that was like, okay, that's new. Haven't seen that as much from him. But by and large, since he's taken over as a starter, he's been really accurate and highly productive, both throwing the football and running the football. So much so that he has kept Austin Simmons on the bench. Austin Simmons is healthy and ready to play again, but they're rolling with Trinidad Chambers. Because again, he's doing historic things, at least in that 3 game stretch for this Ole Miss offense. Now, how long is that leash if he starts to struggle here in Athens between the hedges over the weekend? Will they go to Austin Simmons? Potentially. That would not shock me at all. And Austin Simmons is a talented guy. He's a little bit of running threat himself. He's not as I don't think he's not as thick as Trinidad Chambers. I don't know if he can take the hits the way that Chambers has shown the ability to be able to. And he has not been as consistently good of a decision maker. I know it's a small sample size early in the year, as Chambliss has been. He's putting the ball in Harbin's way far too much. He wasn't being super accurate himself. So I'm curious to see what that looked like. What's that look like? Chambliss is going to be the guy. I'm confident in that coming into the game. But if he starts to struggle, which fingers crossed, let's hope that's the case, do they turn to Austin Simmons? How quickly will that happen if it does indeed happen? So let's just keep an eye on that. But right now, it is Trinidad Chambliss' team at the quarterback position. Next guy here, number 2. Running back Keywan Lacey, who was like the number 3 back for Missouri a year ago, didn't want to sit around and wait. Missouri goes out and get Ahmad Hardy from Louisiana Monroe, who's one of the better running backs in the entire country, if not maybe the best running back in the entire country, leading the SEC right now with 130 rushing yards per game. But Keywan Lacey has been awesome in his own right. Didn't want to sit around and wait at Missouri. Didn't like where he was in the depth chart. Transfers to Ole Miss. And he has been fantastic for them, guys. In fact, yeah, Ahmad Hardy is leading the SEC in rushing yards per game right now. But it's Lacey who is second in the league, just a hair under 100 yards rushing per game, 97 per game, only 4.6 yards per rush. He hasn't been overly explosive, but here's the thing, guys. He does have explosive ability. He does. He runs with good power as well. He's shifty out there. He's all legs. He's all legs out there at 5'11", 200 pounds. But the way he moves, he's got some wiggle in his game. I think he does have some explosive ability. I know he hasn't been overly explosive all year long, but he does have that ability to bite off a chunk play on any given snap. And he does run for a guy that's 5'11", 200 pounds. He will get behind his pads and run through you. He does run with some power. So I think this guy is a really good running back. He really is, guys. He is as good of a running back in this conference, not named Ahmad Hardy. Like, I was very impressed with him when I watched them week 1 against Georgia State. I thought, okay, what's Georgia State? Kentucky? He was really good in that game, guys. And that was a game where Austin Simmons really struggled. And Lacey was a big part of why they were able to go on the road and actually end up winning that game by a touchdown, barely, but they ended up winning that game. So he's a really good back. We have to contain him, have to get him on the ground because he can be tough to tackle. All right, number 3. Now, Ole Miss is interesting this year. They have a number of wide receivers that all do similar things. And they don't have one guy that's just like the dude at wide receiver. Trey Harris was that guy from a year ago when he was healthy. He wasn't always healthy. But they have a number of guys. You got Harrison Wallace, you got Deshaun Stribling, who was at Washington State, then Oklahoma State, and now he's at Ole Miss. Caden Lee in the slot is really, really good. But none of those receivers have really separated themselves in terms of the numbers they put up, receptions, receiving yards. But they can all hurt you on any given snap. They're all capable of hurting, which is something that does make them difficult to defend because how do you defend that? Like, who are you going to double? Can you double anybody? Because they're all capable of winning one-on-one. Absolutely, they are. But the guy I am going to highlight for you here is not even a receiver, but he is the receiving threat that concerns me the most in this game because of the matchups that he can create, the matchup issues that he can create from the tight end position. That is Daquan Wright. He is a new age hybrid tight end, that mover-esque tight end playing that role. He has 359 yards receiving right now on 16 catches. Let's do the math there, guys. I'm a math guy, but we can do that. That's 22.4 yards per catch from the tight end position. So he's an athlete and he creates matchup problems for opposing defenses. He's actually only 2 yards behind Harrison Wallace, who came over from Penn State prior to this season, as the leading receiver on the team from the tight end position. He is a dude. He is tough to handle. Again, a major matchup problem for linebackers, for safeties, whoever tries to defend that guy, because he has the ability to operate almost and function almost like a receiver. He has that type of ability, can function effectively enough as an H-back, not inline blocker, but an H-back blocker, kind of a lead blocker there. But make no mistake about it, guys, his biggest attribute is what he brings to the table from a receiving standpoint and the matchup problems he can create for opposing defense. Because, guys, Ole Miss is still a team, as I'll talk about a little bit later on, that wants to run the football first and foremost. They're heavy run right now, like 58% run right now, almost 59% run. So how do you defend that, right? Well, you want to match that with heavier personnel, right? Because they're going to run the ball 59% of the time. You want to match that with heavier defensive personnel. But when you do that, you better watch out. When you have a guy like Daquan Wright, you bring heavy personnel on the field to defend the run game. Now he's going to create all sorts of matchup issues for you. So he makes it really hard for defenses to match up with heavy personnel against an offense that does run the ball a lot more still than they throw it, which might be a misnomer. A lot of people out there think Ole Miss is this pass-happy offense. Yeah, they'll throw it, and they're explosive throwing the ball, but they still run the ball far more than they throw it. So Daquan Wright, 6'4", 255, major matchup problem. He is the pass threat that concerns me the most in this game. All right, let's flip things over to the defense side of the football here. I'm going to go 2-for-1 specials here on the last two names. So instead of giving you 5 names, I'm actually going to give you 7, but these guys play the same position and they alternate. So I'm going to include them together here. So let's go number 4. Let's go their buck linebacker, like their version of our jack linebacker, Princewell Umanmielen, not Princely, the brother of Princely, and then Suntarine Perkins. These are their top 2 edge rushers from that buck linebacker, again, like the equivalent to our jack linebacker position. But here's the thing, guys. I think both of them are capable of wrecking game plans as pass rushers off the edge. I think they have that ability. But the issue for Ole Miss is that to this point in the season, roughly halfway through the season, they have not been overly productive. They have 2 sacks and 4.5 tackles for loss between them. In fact, guys, this is crazy. I would not have guessed this. Did not have this on my 2025 SEC schedule bingo card this year. Suntarine Perkins has 0 sacks this season. Guys, if you're familiar with who he is, and if you watched Ole Miss play a year ago, you're familiar with their defense, he led their team. He was second in the SEC with 10.5 sacks a year ago. He's got 0. His entire career, he's been a sack. He's been like a pass rush specialist. He's been a liability against the run because he's light in the freaking britches. So if he's not rushing the passer at a high level, you got to question, like, what does the guy bring to the table? So they have not been productive rushing the passer and really creating havoc at all in the backfield. But saying that, I do believe they have the ability to do that. Kind of like Kewan Lacey hasn't been overly explosive in the run game, but has the ability to be explosive on any given play. Because both these guys, Umanmielen and Perkins, they're both good explosive athletes. But I do think they're both liabilities against the run, in particular Suntarine Perkins. Honestly, I do not know how they keep this guy on the field as often as they do, because he actually still plays more, not that much more. He does play more than Umanmielen does. Umanmielen's a transfer from Nebraska. He's new to the team this year. Perkins has been around for a long time. But guys, Perkins is only 6'2", 210, or 220. At one point in his career, he was listed like 6'1", 210. Now they list him at 6'2", 220. But you look at him out there on tape, is he really 220? I don't know. Up for debate. But he ain't big. We can say that. He is definitely light in the britches. And that's why he's a liability against the run. He has a really hard time setting the edge. When he has any success against the run, it's him using his quickness to like slide inside blocks and get around blocks real quick. But if he has to take on a blocker head on, he almost has no chance because he just doesn't have the size. Now, Imam Yellen is much bigger. He's 6'5", 245. He's much more in line with like what our jack linebackers are like. Look at Quintavious Johnson. He's like 6'4", 255. That's what Uman Yellen is. He's more of a classic jack buck linebacker. Perkins doesn't have that size. He really has the size of an off-ball inside linebacker, but that's not really what he does. He's a pass rush specialist, but they still have him on the field on standard downs at times. They're starting to use Umam Yellen more and more on standard downs, but they'll still have Perkins out there in situations. And when he's out there, guys, on standard downs, you need to find him and run the freaking football right at him because he can't stop it, man. I am telling you, he is a liability against the run. Imam Yellen hasn't been great against the run either, but he has been better than Perkins has, in my opinion. So those are two right there. One more 2-for-1 special because they don't play the exact same position, but they both play defensive line. William Eccles and Xavier Harris are the two best interior defensive linemen for this Ole Miss defense. In fact, they have been together far more disruptive than the edge players, Umami Yellen and Perkins, have been for this Ole Miss team. Combined, Eccles and Harris from the interior defensive line positions have 5 sacks and 9 tackles for loss. Again, compared to 2 sacks and 4 TFLs combined between Perkins and Umami Yellen. So they've been more disruptive. That's where they're strongest on that defensive front. But when you watch them play, guys, they can give you some pass rush and push from the interior in those passing situations, but I still think they are both susceptible to getting moved on standard downs, being displaced in the run game. Eccles is 6'3", 310, solid size, but he's not particularly powerful at the point of attack when I watch him on tape. He gets moved far too easily when I watch him on tape. And Harris is an interesting guy. He's 6'8", but only 330. So 330 is big, but when you're 6'8", 330 is not as big as it is if you're like 6'4", or 6'3", 330. And when you're 6'8" as an interior defensive lineman, it's tough to play with the type of pad level you need to on a consistent basis to win up front. It's hard to play that low when you're 6'8". So, I mean, you guys know the old adage. I still believe it's true. Low man wins, especially in the trenches. And when you're 6'8", it's really hard to consistently be the low man, even if you are a hulking 6'8", 330 beast of a human being. So I still think with his poor pad level at times, I think more often than not, he does get moved, even though he is a big 6'8", 330 guy. So, yes, they have been more disruptive than their edge players, but I just don't think they're particularly strong themselves against the run, which is kind of a theme for this Ole Miss team, as we'll dive into a little bit later on the show. All right, speaking of that, let's move into the next category here. Let's go 4 stats that matter. Speaking of the issues that Ole Miss has had stopping the run, let's get a little more specific here, guys. This Ole Miss defense is 14th in the SEC in both rush defense, so just raw rush defense numbers. You know, that can be a limited stat, but here's the other thing. From an efficiency standpoint, they're also only 14th in the league in yards per rush allowed. They're giving up 157 yards rushing per game and 4.7 yards per rush. And guys, that's with playing the worst rushing offense in the SEC, bar none this season. One of the worst in the country, LSU. LSU is averaging 115 rushing yards per game, dead last in the SEC, 113th nationally in obviously in America. So that's a bad Ole Miss rushing offense. It's been a problem for them all year long. So even playing that bad of a rushing offense, they're still 14th in the league in rush defense, 14th in the league in yards per rush allowed. In fact, I got some game-by-game numbers for you. Guys, Georgia State is not a good football team. They have one win on the season, and they are like in the 120s in rushing offense. Ole Miss gave 191 yards rushing to Georgia State. Kentucky, we saw them here in Athens a couple weeks ago. Not a good offense. They had some pretty solid rush numbers coming into our game, but you saw what happened when they played a real defense. We stuffed their run game. Even though I think Seth McGowan's a good back, they gave 172 yards rushing to that Kentucky ground game. And McGowan had a really big game against them. Arkansas, who does run the ball really well, they're a top 10 rushing offense. They gave up 221 on the ground to Arkansas. Tulane, a good G5 program, but a G5 program, ran for $176 on the Rebels. LSU, they did hold LSU to 57 yards rushing and 2.6 yards per rush. But again, LSU, guys, is dreadfully bad running the football. They just can't do it. They simply can't. And then Washington State put up 127 and 4.5 yards per rush on them a week ago, which might not seem like a lot, guys. If you watch that game, Wazoo lost 22 yards in sack yardage. Their top running back ran for 88 yards on 10 carries. Again, not a math guy. We can do that math. That's 8.8 yards per carry. Washington State's top running back ran for 8.8 yards per carry against this Ole Miss defense. Okay, so is it clear now? This Ole Miss defense really struggles to stop the run. I think that's important. That's something we'll come back to a little bit later on, dive into a little bit more. All right, stat number 2 here. They are not remotely as disrupted defensively as they were a year ago. I got some numbers to back this up, guys. They are 11th in the SEC right now, in 100th nationally in sacks. Guys, last year, they were awesome defensively. Everyone's talking about, Jackson Dart, the Ole Miss offense. And don't get me wrong, they are awesome offensively last year. They always are under Lane Kiffin. That's been the thing. They've always been great on offense, but the defense sucked. Like in 2020, it was like one of the worst SEC defenses I've ever seen in my life. It didn't stop anybody. So if they were ever going to be like real contenders, they had, number one, get stronger on the lines of scrimmage, but they had to improve defensively. He brings in Pete Golding from Alabama. He did a really good job trying to trend things in the right direction. But last year, they went from the defense went from being a liability for them consistently almost every year to being not just good for Ole Miss, but one of the best, if not maybe the single best defense in all of America last year, guys, bar none. I'm not even when they were healthy, they were as good as any defense in America. So they're 11th in the SEC and 100th nationally in sacks this season right now through the halfway point of the season. Guys, last year they were first in the SEC and first nationally in sacks per game. They put up 4 sacks a game last year. Right now, halfway through this season, they're only averaging 1.5 sacks per game. You guys know we've talked a lot on this show all season long about Georgia's issues rushing the passer. Well, guys, Georgia has 8 sacks in the year. Not good enough. That's got to improve. We saw some positive things against Auburn. We'll see if that carries over in this game. But if you think Georgia's been bad and you've been frustrated about that, which I think rightfully so, guys, Ole Miss has been almost as bad. Georgia has 8 sacks. Ole Miss has 9. Okay, so we're talking about a negligible difference here. And last year, guys, again, they were first nationally, not just in sacks, first nationally in tackles for loss. Get this, 120 TFLs last year. They averaged almost 10 tackles for loss a game last year, a little more than 9.5. Where are they right now? Halfway through this season, 11 in the SEC, 124th nationally in tackles for loss, averaging slightly more. Sorry, my allergies still killing me. Slightly more than 4 a game. So they're not even half as good defensively in terms of creating disruption, havoc for the opposing offense as they were a year ago, at least statistically. When you watch them, guys, when you watch it on tape, you see it. They just don't look like it. They don't look like they're the same. Last year, they looked the part, man. You go out and you get in Princely Mommy Ellen, you get Walter Nolan, and you're just tearing people apart. We had J.J. Pegues up front as well. They were awesome. I think the best defensive front in the country last year. This year, no. You watch them, you're like average at best up front this year, and the stats show that, guys. And that was the biggest change a year ago. Again, that's what made them different last year. I think at Ole Miss last year, I know they lost to Kentucky. I know they lost to Florida. That was on them. Man, they blew it. When they were healthy and at their best, I believe that Ole Miss team was as good as anyone in the country, including Ohio State. We kind of saw it ourselves in Oxford last year, right? Last November. Yeah, you remember that? Sucked, right? Hate every second of it. I was there. A lot of you were probably there. It freaking sucked, right? But we saw Ole Miss, I don't know if it fully at their best, but a good version of Ole Miss. When they were at their best, they could have beaten anybody. They just weren't always at their best. They weren't against Kentucky. They weren't against Florida. They weren't against LSU. And they lost all 3 of those games. That's on them, man. Like, they're going to have to live with that. But that's what made them different, guys, is the lines of scrimmage, and specifically the defensive lines of scrimmage, and they simply don't have those guys. In fact, now, if you look at their sack numbers and their tackle for loss numbers, their havoc numbers this year compared to where they were in 2023, their numbers are worse from a havoc standpoint defensively than where they were in 2023. And let's not forget, guys, last year was a bad look for Georgia and Oxford. But what happened, remind me, the last time Ole Miss came to Georgia, came to Athens in 2023 with a defense that was more disruptive than this Ole Miss defense is. Oh, yeah, that's right. Georgia beat them 52-17. I'm not saying it's going to happen again. I'm just telling you, this Ole Miss defense isn't as good as the one in 2023. Statistically, they're not. They're not, guys. Just putting that out there. All right. Third stat that matters. Well, okay, defensively, not as good. but they're still freaking awesome on offense, guys. They are first nationally in plays of 30 or more yards on the season. They have 26 plays of 30 or more yards. In fact, they're fifth in plays of 40 or more yards, 12 of those on the season halfway through the year, guys. So that's always been a calling card, a hallmark of Lane Kiffin offenses at Ole Miss, really wherever he's been. And once again this year, it is very much the same deal. That's what they do, and they haven't fallen off there. They've reverted back defensively. They're still that same explosive Ole Miss offense. And those numbers there prove that. And then number 4 here, our final stat that matters. I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but let's dive a little bit more deeper here. This is still a run-heavy team. So I just told you guys they're really explosive. It's a run-heavy team, but they use the run to set up explosive pass plays. They're just a hair under 59% run on the year, a little bit more than 41% pass on the year. But they're also 8th nationally in passing offense, 311 yards per game. They're also number 1 in the SEC and 6th nationally in passing in yards per passing attempt. Guys are averaging 10 yards per attempt. That's where their explosive plays are coming from. They're only averaging 4.72 yards per rush. They've been good enough running the ball, and they'll stick to it. It's kind of like Tennessee. They'll keep running the football. They'll keep running the football to create the explosive plays that they were trying to create in the passing game on the outside. Tennessee is still, like people think Tennessee is this like just run and gun, throwing the football all over the field team. Yeah, they'll throw the ball, but they still run the ball far more than they run it. Ole Miss is similar, guys. They are committed to running the football to create the looks they want on the outside that allow them to create those explosive plays. So while they are run heavy, the run is essentially used to create those explosive opportunities in the passing game because that is where they gut you. 10 yards an attempt, 6th nationally in yards per attempt this season. All right, well, now with that, we got 4 stats that matter. Let's move to 3 reasons for optimism. 3 reasons why you Georgia fans should feel pretty good about Georgia's chances to win this big top 10 matchup with game day in town on Saturday. Number 1, guys, we're gonna cycle back here. I told you guys start off with the 4 stats that matter with those atrocious rush defense numbers. So if I'm looking at a matchup in this game that favors Georgia, you got to start there, guys. The Georgia rush offense versus the Ole Miss rush defense. I don't even think this is a slight advantage for Georgia. I think this is a significant advantage for the Dogs in this football game. Yes, like Georgia struggled to run the ball last week against Auburn on the road. Only 79 yards rushing, which was our lowest rushing output of the season by far. But you remember last week coming into that game, I told you guys we were averaging 200 yards rushing against SEC teams. We played some good teams, y'all. Like, yeah, Kentucky, okay, whatever. But Alabama, Tennessee, those are good SEC teams. Those 2 teams right now are combined, 10-1 on the year? Or 10-2 on the year. Both teams have 1 loss. And we were still averaging over 200 yards rushing, like right at 200 yards rushing per game against SEC opponents. And even with last weekend's 79-yard rushing effort, we're still averaging 170 yards rushing against SEC teams. And guys, Auburn, yeah, we didn't run the ball well against them. But you saw it. And I told you all last week, that is the best defensive line that we've seen all year. And I believe it is the best defensive front that we will see all season long, at least in the regular season. We'll see what happens. All bets are off when you get to the postseason. We'll see. Hopefully playoffs. Fingers crossed. I don't know. Long way to go. We'll see there. And so Auburn was great. I think the best front we'll see all year. Ole Miss, they might be the worst defensive front, though certainly the worst rush defense that we'll see all year, with maybe the exception of Mississippi State. Mississippi State is really bad against the run. Teams, for whatever reason, sometimes just don't try to run the ball against them. Like Tennessee, Tennessee just really did not exploit that weakness in a way I thought they probably should have, and then they almost lost that game in overtime. But Mississippi State sucks against the run, but Ole Miss is right there. These Mississippi teams cannot stop the run this year, guys. And again, I'm going to go back to those numbers I gave you. Georgia State, 191 yards rushing against this Ole Miss defense. Where does Georgia State rank in rushing offense right now? 130th. 130th nationally. What, there are 134 teams in the country this year, FBS? That didn't get it done, y'all. That's atrocious. Kentucky put up 172 on the ground. They're 65th nationally in rushing offense. Arkansas is good. They're 17th nationally, but they put up 221 on Ole Miss. Tulane, solid, 40th nationally in rushing offense. They put up 176. And guys, Georgia is one of the I know stats can tell you one thing. I think Georgia's one of the better running teams in the SEC this season. In Georgia, I also think in this game, is going to have the ability to generate explosive plays on the ground. Because not only is Ole Miss bad against the run in general, they are 14th in the SEC in rushing plays of 20 or more yards allowed. They're also 15th in the league out of 16 teams, 15th in rush plays of 30 or more yards allowed. So not only do I think we're going to be able to run the ball, I think we can bite off explosive plays. Think what we did against Alabama, guys, attacking the edge there, and think about where Ole Miss is weak on the edges against the run. Suntarine Perkins, Uman Mielen. Yes, I think we have a chance to bite off some explosive plays on the ground, particularly on the edges. And look, guys, I know that we're banged up in the offensive line. That is something here that can mitigate our advantage to a degree. Certainly, we'll see where our health is when we get to the game on Saturday. I'm waiting for those injury reports. But when you look at where we're banged up, like we're banged up on the edges. Okay, we're largely okay on the interior. Micah Morris is certainly banged up, and he's I sure he's hanging on by a thread, but he's been playing, right? Like he's playing out there, he's playing at a pretty high level for us. So we're largely okay on the interior. So even with the injuries, I've always been more concerned about the pass pro with our offensive line, certainly with the injuries. Even with the injuries, we've been good with our run blocking all year. We've consistently gotten movement. We have. So I don't see why that would change against an Ole Miss defense, that defensive front that I think is probably, at least among the SEC fronts we faced, probably the worst that we faced, at least against the run, right? So, like, look, I know that Monroe Freeling is banged up right now and he won't be fully healthy. But, guys, you watched that game when he came in. Like, I know he wasn't healthy out there, put it on the line for us. But not only was he holding his own, there were at times he was just flat out working Keldrick Falk, a future first rounder. And Monroe was like on one freaking leg out there, guys. So, if he was able to have that type of success against a guy like Keldrick Falk, a guy I believe that will be a first round draft pick, what's he going to be able to do against guys like Sunshine Perkins and Prince Willie Ellen? I think he's going to have a lot of success, right? So I really like Georgia's advantage in the trenches overall, but I especially like this matchup with the Georgia run game against the Ole Miss rush defense, the Georgia offensive front against the Ole Miss defensive front. Guys, remember, when we beat the crap out of them back in 2023, where did we own that game? In the freaking trenches, right? And that's what prompted Lane Kiffin to say, if we're going to beat teams like this, we got to go fix the trenches. And they did last year. They went and fixed it. Offensive line and defensive line. This year, they don't have the same caliber guys on either line of scrimmage. I think that does give Georgia a big advantage. So you could say the trenches in general, trench play is an advantage for Georgia. But we want to be specific. I do like the matchup. Georgia rush offense, Ole Miss rush defense. All right, number 2 here. Another reason for optimism for you Georgia fans out there. I know a lot of people look at this line, Georgia right now, last time I checked, 7.5 point favorite. And they say, huh? What? The number 5 team, Ole Miss, more than a touchdown underdog to a Georgia team that has looked far from dominant this year? And I wouldn't argue that Georgia looked far from dominant. I mean, that's clear. It's a different era, right? Parity has become real in college football in the way it never has been before. But what people are discounting, if they think that, if they're looking at this game from that mindset, sure, Georgia, I'll agree, hasn't been dominant. But what they're discounting is that Ole Miss has also been far from dominant. Why do people think Ole Miss has been dominant this year? Have you watched it? Have people who think Ole Miss has just been like rolling over people? Have they actually watched Ole Miss seriously, or they just look at their ranking and say, "Oh yeah, oh they beat LSU." Okay, barely at home against an Ole Miss offense that cannot move the football, period, certainly on the ground. It was not equipped to take advantage of a glaring weakness that Ole Miss has, stopping the run. And I got some numbers to back this up, guys, all right? Ole Miss right now in the season is plus 786 in their total yardage margin. So what that means, they've outgained their opponents through the first half of the season by a total of 786 yards. Georgia, a little bit below that at plus 636. We've outgained our opponents by 636 yards total on the season. But it's not apples to apples here, guys. These two teams have played very, very different schedules. Ole Miss's opponents right now are a combined 18 and 17. Georgia's opponents are right now a combined 22 and 15. Look at the SEC opponents. Sure, Ole Miss has played LSU at home. LSU is a 5-1 team, and they're good. They're really good defensively, but they're not good on offense. They cannot move the football whatsoever. Georgia's played on the road at Tennessee, played Alabama, who right now is looking like one of the better teams, if not the best team in the SEC. Yeah, at home, but we played Alabama. So that's two. So they played one really good team, or if you want to call LSU a really good team, I'm not sure. I'm not convinced they are. But Georgia's played two teams that are 5-1, played on the road, hostile environment at night at Auburn a week ago, and yeah, we both played Kentucky. Okay. And if you look at the non-con games, Georgia State's freaking terrible. Marshall's not good. Marshall's 3-3. Georgia State's 1-5. Okay, we played Austin P and they played Tulane. There's that. But Georgia's schedule has been more difficult. And yeah, Ole Miss's yards margin is a little bit better, but by a very small margin. Certainly, when you factor in that Georgia's strength of schedule right now is stronger than what Ole Miss has faced. In fact, against relatively pure competition, Ole Miss has been no more dominant than Georgia. Actually, less dominant than Georgia. Right? So all people wonder, like, why is Georgia favored by 7.5? Ole Miss has been so much better. Have they? Really? Against real competition? Because in SEC games, Ole Miss has won their 3 SEC games by an average score, by an average margin of 6 points. Not even a touchdown. In their 3 SEC games. They've won them all. They're 3-0 in the league, but they've won those games by an average of 6 points per game. And those 3 teams, who are they? Arkansas, Kentucky, two of the I would say lesser teams in the league, right? And then sure, LSU at home. Georgia is currently we're beating our opponents by an average of a little less than 8 points per game. That includes the Alabama loss. So against 4 SEC games, we are actually outscoring opponents by an average of about 8 points per game against, again, a much more difficult schedule. All right. And look, some of the non-con games here for Ole Miss. Yeah, they beat the crap out of Georgia State, 63-7. Again, Georgia State's 1-5. They beat Wazoo last week. I don't know if some of you watched that game. And I know some people want to say, well, that was just a clunker look-ahead game for Ole Miss. Maybe, okay, but why are you giving them that benefit of the doubt? They barely beat Washington State, 24-21. 24-21, guys, and we're losing for large portions of that game. Washington State lost to North Texas, guys. Not only did Washington State lose to North Texas, they lost 59-10 to North Texas. That is the team that Ole Miss at home beat by 3 points. It was down for most of that game a week ago. So you can call it a look-ahead game if you want. That's fine. That's fine if you don't give them that excuse. That's totally fine. Coming off a bye? Really? Is that all-inspiring? Does that scream dominant? I don't think so. So I know there's this perception that Ole Miss has just been rolling over teams. They've been more dominant against their schedule than Georgia has. That's not the case. The facts don't bear that out. And in fact, Georgia's been better against a more difficult schedule, more dominant against a more difficult schedule than Ole Miss has. So I do think that is a little bit of a reason for optimism. If you're concerned, like Ole Miss just looks like they're really tough to beat. Yeah, they're a good football team. I'm not telling you they're not. But they're not some unbeatable team. They're not some freaking juggernaut guys. They are mortal just like anyone else. They bleed just like us. And we have every bit the chance to beat them on Saturday. All right, last one here, last reason for optimism. Let's go home field edge here, guys. Ole Miss has played 5 of their 6 games to this point at home. The only road game they have played to this point was week 2 on the road in Lexington. It wasn't even a night game, guys. And what happened in that game? Yeah, they won. They won 30-23. Now, Austin Simmons was starting quarterback in that game. It was not Trinidad Chambliss, a little bit different there, but that's the only road game they've played. Trinidad Chambliss, coming over from Ferris State, all right, wherever in the universe Ferris State is, has literally never been in an environment the likes of which he will be in on Saturday between the hedges. He simply has not experienced anything like that. He hasn't. That's just the fact, guys. You tell me he experienced something like that at Ferris State? Zero chance. He didn't. He hasn't started a road game yet. He hasn't experienced anything like it, guys. So even if you are going to ignore the numbers I just gave you about how Ole Miss has not been any more dominant this season than Georgia against a lesser schedule, so even if you think Ole Miss is just better than Georgia, let me ask you this. Are they above going out on the road and losing? Are they really? Because I think a better Ole Miss team, in my opinion, a clearly better Ole Miss team last year went out and lost games at Florida and at LSU. LSU was a solid team last year. Florida, no, no, they blew it. And I know it wasn't a road game. Also, Kentucky at home. Kentucky was a terrible team last year. They didn't make a bowl game. And this year, they go to Kentucky. Yeah, they win it, but that was a much closer game late in the game than it probably should have been. So even if you think they're better, are you sure that this team is above going on the road and losing to a team like Georgia? And even if you think Ole Miss is better than Georgia, do you think they're that much better than Georgia? Like, really? It's that much better that there's no chance they can go in Summer Stadium in a hostile environment in a crowd that goes bananas for games like this with a quarterback who has never been in that type of environment? Are we sure they're above going on the road? and laid an egg like they did in 2023 with a better quarterback who's now was the first round draft pick, now starting for the Giants and losing that game 52-17? Are we sure? Again, I'm not saying they're going to lose the game that bad, but if you're a Georgia fan looking for reasons for optimism, I do think the home field edge here matters. I really, really do. All right, let's put things over, guys, and let's now look at two causes for concern. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, as I often tell you guys. There are reasons, like real tangible reasons to like Georgia's chances in this game, but there are real reasons to be concerned as well. There's two sides to this. The biggest reason I have for concern in this game is the explosive nature of the Ole Miss passing offense. It is hands down the single most explosive passing offense in the SEC. It's not even close, guys. Statistically, it's not even close. They have generated 21 passing plays of 30 or more yards. The next closest team, Tennessee, has only put up 13 passing plays of 30 or more yards. Now, I do not think that Georgia has been as bad against the pass, and I don't think Georgia's given up as many explosive plays against the pass as a lot of people want to make it out to be. If you look at the numbers statistically, we're like middle of the pack in giving up explosive passing plays. But I will agree, it's still too many. It's still too many if we want to accomplish the things that we want to accomplish. If you want to beat a team like Ole Miss, we have certainly given up too many big explosive passing plays. I do agree with that. And Ole Miss does a really good job. A lot of their plays, these explosive passing plays, are created because they do a good job with matchups, number one, like Daquan Wright at tight end, and then creating eye violations. And they'll run the football, run the football, run the football, get your eyes in the backfield, hit you play action on the top, hit you in the RPO, create explosive passing play, right? They create eye violations. And that has what has gotten us. So we've given up explosive passing plays, by and large, it has not been us just getting beat one-on-one. Rarely has it been that. Far more commonly, it's been us with bust, with eye violations, eye discipline issues. And Ole Miss does a fantastic job of generating bust, of creating eye violations. And that's what's gotten us. So that is certainly a concern there. For me, as far as I'm looking at this game, I don't think it'd be a bad idea on third downs, at least on third and obvious passing situations, to slide one of our actual cornerbacks inside to match up with a guy like Caden Lee, who's a really fast, shifty slot receiver, a dangerous receiver from the slot. I mean, for years, guys, and I talk about this with some of our people on social media. I want to address it here real quick. I've always been fascinated by the idea. If we have multiple corners we like, which seems like we do this year, you got Dan Everett, you got Ellis Robinson, now DeMello Jones really coming on. If you got three guys you like, why aren't we sliding one of them inside in obvious passing situations? Last year, what we would do is we would take Janelle Guerrero off the field on third downs. Primarily, we would put Malachi Starks in that star position. We trusted him to cover in those man situations. He did a pretty good job for us there. It's not really where he excels, but he was good enough there, better than what Janelle was giving us. So, but why not slide Everett inside? Of all the cornerbacks, he's the guy that's bigger, more physical. It's one of the attributes he brings to the table as a corner. He's a big physical corner with also really good coverage skills. So I think he might be a guy that you get matched up on the inside there on your slot receiver from that nickel position, that our star DB, and you have DeMello and you have Ellis Robinson outside. Or if you want to match like a smaller, shiftier receiver in Caden Lee with a smaller, shiftier DB of our own, maybe you throw in DeMello Jones there, maybe you throw in Ellis Robinson there. But I like Janelle Guerrero a lot. I do. I think he's really improved a lot as a pass defender. I still don't love him in matchups against guys like Caden Lee. If we're going to do some man coverage stuff, and we will. Like, we'll run some zone stuff too. We'll run some quarter stuff. We do a variety of different things. You can't do one thing against Ole Miss. But I think it's worthwhile looking at sliding somebody inside, an actual corner inside in those third and obvious situations to match up with some of their guys so that they cannot get the matchups they want. Because that's what they're trying to do, guys. They're trying to create those matchups. And I don't think we want to play to their hands. So it might just be something to think about. I don't know. I don't know if that's going to happen. It's just speculation. But for me, that's something worth thinking about. And then Chris Cole, I think on third downs especially, is going to be big here in this game. I mentioned Daquan Wright at tight end as one of my 5 players to watch for this Ole Miss team, 5 players to know. And he is a matchup problem. Chris Cole is an eliminator. He is awesome in pass coverage. Like, he wipes out opposing tight ends. Gunnar Helm for Texas a year ago, put Chris Cole out there against him in Austin, shut him down. Straight up shut him down. And I think he is the guy best equipped. Look, we got to have Raylan Wilson on the field. You're going to have CJ Allen on the field. And those guys are improving in coverage as well. Raylan, I think, is a little bit better than CJ, but they're both improving. But Cole's different. Cole's different in coverage, guys. And Justin Williams has that type of athleticism as well. But Cole on third downs, get him on the field in our dime package, match him up with Daquan Wright, and you eliminate a guy that I think could eliminate a guy that I believe is their most dangerous matchup problem as a pass catcher. So there's something to think about there as well. All right, second reason for concern, quarterback run game. Jackson Arnold, I don't want to say he went wild running the ball in the first half, but he had way too much success running the ball in the first half, even on like the scrambles and design QB run stuff. We played him really well in the second half. A big part of that was some adjustments we made. We went some more even fronts, and we went away from the tight front or mid front, some of the three down stuff we were doing. We brought safeties in the box. We got KJ basically as a box linebacker, and we took away their perimeter run game. And when we did that, like he was basically KJ was the contained guy on the fly sweep, and then we were taking Quintavious Johnson, our edge player, and we're actually crashing on the quarterback or the run game. So we had, my opinion, how we were able to shut them down, especially run the football in the second half. But this is a different animal with Ole Miss. It's not as easy to come out and say, oh yeah, we're just going to do that to shut down their quarterback run game because they have the ability to throw the football in a way that Auburn just simply doesn't. Auburn is like the least explosive passing offense in the SEC. Ole Miss is the most, by far, the most explosive passing offense in the SEC. So playing a lot of single high looks, getting safeties in the box, bringing KJ as a box safety. I get why you want to do that when they run the football as much as they do, but then you really open yourself up to getting beat with explosive passing plays down the field. So you really want to watch for that. And so what are they going to try to do? Because again, they want to run the football to try to create the looks they won the passing game. They're going to use a QB run game, like Auburn in the first half, to try to force us to change what we're doing defensively, right? And move some guys around the secondary that would create the matchups that they're trying to create. So that is a concern for me. Can we stop the QB run game with a too high safety shell? Can we? We've had trouble doing that, guys, in recent years. Not just this year, but in recent, we've done better this year. But in recent years, we've had struggles doing that, guys. And Lane Kiffin's an offensive guy. He knows that. He knows it, man. So I imagine that they will turn to the QB run game, quite especially when you have a guy like Trinidad Chambers who is a threat to run the football. Turned him a lot in this game. Like with design QB run stuff, not just like scrambles, like improvisation out there, but turned the run game, the QB run game, to neutralize what I do think again is a big advantage that Georgia has in the trenches. If you don't believe you can block Georgia up front one-on-one, well, how do you address that? Well, you try to take back the numbers. How do you take back the numbers? You use quarterback as the runner. And now all of a sudden you can option off defenders. You can use the running back as a lead blocker, and now you take back the numbers. And that kind of neutralizes the advantage that Georgia has in the trenches to some degree there. And like when you have a guy Austin Simmons as a backup, you feel a little bit more comfortable running Trinidad Chambers. So if he gets hurt, you don't want him to get hurt. He's your starter. But if he gets hurt, well, you have a really, really good backup option. The guy who was your starter to open the season in Austin Simmons. So I do think they're going to run the ball a lot with the QB, and I think that's something that's given us trouble in the past. So as a Georgia fan, for me at least, that gives me some heartburn, guys. That certainly does concern me. All right, last thing here, guys. One player to watch on the Georgia roster in this game, a guy who I think can have a big game for the Dogs. I've gone Chris Cole like 3 weeks in a row. We're going to move off that train, and we're going to go Nate Frazier. With Chauncey Bowens potentially not 100%. I don't really know what his status is right now. I'm waiting on the injury report. Kirby didn't really address in his press conference on Monday. But Bowens didn't play much in the fourth quarter of that game. And for a guy who's been our best running back, I think, all year, and especially a guy who's protected the football, knock on wood, better than Nate Frazier has. If he was healthy, you have to think that we would have given him the football more in the fourth quarter. He wasn't out there, like, at all. So what's going on there? I don't really know. So I hope he's 100%. I hope I'm making something out of nothing here, but there's a chance where he might not be 100%. So if that is the case, Nate Frazier is going to get more opportunities like he did against Auburn in that fourth quarter. And Nate Frazier, guys, I haven't given up on this guy. I still think he is absurdly gifted physically. He's just still learning how to play the position, the nuances, the patience, seeing it a little bit better, seeing it better than he has at this point in his career. And I know that the Alabama game, man, like that was frustrating, right? The fumble there is one of several things that cost us that game. And I know people were down on him. He didn't play the rest of that game. But again, I'm not giving up on Nate Frazier. I think this has a chance to be a redemption game for Nate Frazier. This might be a Nate Frazier coming out party. I still believe he has a chance to be one of the better running backs we've seen in Georgia in a long time if he starts to put it all together. So physically, I think he's got the goods. And I think he's getting better and better and better. I think he's seeing it better. I think he's running with more patience. I think this guy is just starting to scratch the surface of how good he can be. And against an Ole Miss rush defense that has really struggled against teams that are remotely competent running the football, and Georgia is far more than remotely competent running the football, with Bowens potentially not fully healthy, I think this could be a Nate Frazier game. He could be a big reason why Georgia might just end up winning this top 10 matchup at home against Ole Miss. So watch out. Watch out for Nate, guys. Let's not give up on him. But all right, guys, that is it. That's all I got for you here. That is my deep dive preview of this Georgia-Ole Miss matchup. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you're a diehard Georgia fan, this is the type of content you can expect on this channel each and every video that I put out there. So make sure to subscribe right now. Turn those notifications on so you don't miss any of the content. Like, comment. What do you guys think? What do you think about this matchup? I would love to hear from you. You feeling good? We feeling bad? Like, where are we? Where's our head at? Love to hear from you guys. But thank you again for being here. I appreciate you. I'm Tyler, and as always, go Dogs!
Man, is there going to be some property destroyed tonight. 26-21. Dogs on top.